Iron bit her wrists every time the wagon lurched. Evangeline sat on splintered planks with her hands chained to a floor ring, a black veil tied so tightly around her head that each breath came warm and stale back into her mouth. Snowmelt dripped through cracks in the wagon roof, ran down her neck, and vanished under the iron collar bolted at her throat. They had put runes on it as if she were dangerous, as if she had ever had anything to shift into. Outside, her birthpack's escort rode in easy silence, broken only by occasional laughter and the clink of tack. She knew all their voices, knew who had taught her to track rabbit prints, who had held her down at 13, while the healer cut her palm to call the wolf, who had looked away every time the blood moon rose and nothing happened in her. "Hollow girl still breathing?" called Garrick, the blood moon beta. His tone was bored, like he was checking cargo. A fist slammed the wagon wall. "She breathes," another man answered. "She cries, too. Heard it all night." "I didn't cry," Evangeline said, and her voice came hoarse from thirst and the veil. The wagon stopped hard. The jolt threw her shoulder into wood. A hand yanked open the rear doors and Winter knifed in. Garrick climbed up, broad in his fur mantle, scar splitting one eyebrow. He crouched and gripped her jaw through the veil. "Don't speak unless Frostborn asks you a direct question," he said softly, which was always worse than when he shouted. "You are tribute, payment, meat between treaty pages. Do you understand?" She kept her mouth shut. He squeezed harder. "Do you understand?" "Yes. Good." He stood and spat near her bare feet. "Your mother begged us not to send you." "She's still my daughter," she said. He barked a laugh. "Didn't stop her signing the transfer." The old wound opened cleanly, no blood left in it. Her mother hadn't met her eyes when the Pack Council declared terms. One daughter of Blood Moon blood to the Frostborn king, in exchange for a winter ceasefire. They had chosen the one with no wolf. Useless things were easiest to surrender. The men outside chuckled while they unhooked the chain from the floor ring and fastened it to a pole. She was made to walk behind the wagon, wrists bound in front now, ankles shackled just loose enough for short steps. The veil stayed on. Snow crunched under thin soles. Wind scraped over her skin and found every bruise. Through wool and leather and ice she could smell the frost-born lands before she saw them. Pine smoke, frozen river, steel, and wolf. So much wolf that her empty chest ached with an old phantom hunger. She had spent 22 years waiting for a shift that never came, first with hope, then with prayer, then with rage, and finally with numb acceptance that she was some cosmic mistake. Hollow Evangeline, moon-cursed, pack shame. At the gate, voices rang out in a different accent, clipped and cold. "State your business," Garrick answered loud enough for the walls to hear. "Blood Moon tribute per signed covenant, delivered alive, untouched by mating claim." Untouched, like she was livestock with clean paperwork. A woman's voice, hard as flint, "Unveil her." "No," Garrick said at once. "Terms specify presentation before Alpha King Sebastian only." Boots approached. She sensed someone circling her, felt a tension like a blade tip at her spine. "She stands," the woman said finally. "Bring her inside." They marched through echoing stone corridors. Heat from braziers mixed with the iron stink of old blood. Somewhere deep in the stronghold, wolves barked once, then fell silent, as if listening. Evangeline counted steps to stay upright. 43, 90, 112. At a holding chamber lined with antler hooks, they chained her to a wall ring and left her with 2 Blood Moon guards. When the door shut, Garrick tore off the veil. Torchlight stabbed her eyes. She blinked at rough stone, at frost feathering the edges of a narrow window too high to reach. "You keep your head down in court," Garrick said, adjusting his gloves. "If Frostborn asks whether you come willingly, you say yes." "I don't." He backhanded her. Her ear rang. You say yes. Blood filled her mouth, metallic and hot. She swallowed it because she refused to spit at his boots. You sold me. We preserved the pack. His lip curled. One barren body for 300 lives. Even you can count that bargain. I'm not barren, I'm hollow. He leaned close enough that she could smell clove on his breath. And if you embarrass us tonight, I'll tell Frostborn you bite children in your sleep. When he left, the 2 guards stayed by the door, pretending not to hear her breathing hitch. She slid down the wall until the chain held her upright and pressed her forehead to cold stone. Somewhere far above, a horn sounded once. Treaty hour. She had told herself all morning to survive this night. Survive the transfer. Survive being sent where no one knew her name. But as the horn faded, another thought crept in. Survive for what? For a pack that called her dead weight? For a mother who signed? She closed her eyes and imagined moonlight on black water, an old dream from childhood. In the dream, she always ran on 4 legs. In waking life, she had never run fast enough for anyone to keep. The lock clicked. Garrick returned with 1 guard and a strip of crimson cloth. Up, he ordered. When she hesitated, the guard hauled her by the chain. Garrick tied the cloth around her eyes, tighter than before. Court doesn't need to see your face unless commanded. His fingers brushed the iron collar and he smiled at something private. If you feel pain tonight, don't scream. Kings despise noise. He turned to leave, then paused as voices drifted from the corridor beyond. Unfamiliar men, low and urgent. Stormborn prisoner secured under 6 sigils? Prophet keeps laughing, said, "Bring the hollow girl near me and watch." Garrick snapped the door shut before she heard more. But the words struck flint inside her skull. Stormborn. Xavier Stormborn was not just a rival alpha. He was the cult butcher whispered about in winter dens, the one blamed for missing pups and severed bond corpses at border shrines. If he was here, if he was part of this treaty night. Panic rose sharp and electric. Garrick grabbed her arm and dragged her into the corridor. They moved quickly, her shackles clipping stone. At an intersection, voices swelled from ahead. Council members assembling, armor shifting, banners unfurling. At her back, one of the Blood Moon guards muttered, "Should have slit her tongue." After the oath, Garrick said, Frostborn gets what was promised. Then she vanishes. The world narrowed to heartbeat and chain weight. Vanishes. Not transferred. Erased. No more bargaining with obedience. At the next turn, she stumbled deliberately. Garrick cursed and jerked her upright. She twisted, slammed her shoulder into his knee, and felt him buckle a fraction. Enough. She drove her forehead into his mouth. Bone cracked. He roared. Evangeline ran blind. The crimson blindfold slipped to one eye. Corridor lights smeared gold and black. Behind her, boots thundered and Garrick shouted, "Seize her! Blood Moon prisoner loose!" She flew down the left passage because cold air flowed from it, and cold meant open space. Her ankle chain bit and rang. She hit a stairwell, half fell, caught railing, kept going. Voices erupted below. A spear haft struck stone near her ribs. She veered through an archway into blinding brightness. The great hall. Ice-glass windows soared 3 stories high, moonlight pouring in silver sheets across packed wolves, elders, warriors, and emissaries from 5 packs. Banners draped the walls, Frostborn white wolf on midnight blue, Blood Moon crimson crescent, and others she barely registered. At the far end stood an obsidian throne carved with claw marks, and on the steps before it, restrained by chains inked in black sigils, knelt a man with storm-gray eyes and a smile like rot. Xavier Stormborn lifted his head the moment she burst in. "There," he whispered, though she heard him over the entire hall as if he spoke into her ear. "My empty little vessel." Pain detonated in her chest. Not a stab. An eruption. A living howl clawing from sternum to throat. Evangeline screamed and dropped to her knees. The sound that tore out of her was not human. It was raw, feral grief, ancient and furious, and it answered something. Xavier laughed through split lips. Black sigils flared over his skin. From somewhere impossible, inside him, through him, she felt a second heartbeat slam against her own. Fast, desperate, furious. Mine. A voice without words cried in the marrow of her bones. Mine, mine, mine. The hall exploded in shouting. Warriors rushed forward. Garrick barreled in behind her, blood on his chin, yelling for restraint, for order, for lies she couldn't parse through the roar in her skull. Then the room went silent in a single crushing wave of power. Alpha Aura. It rolled over the stones like an avalanche, forcing knees to bend, breaths to hitch, heads to drop. Evangeline swayed, vision tunneling, and saw him descend the throne steps. Sebastian Frostborn. He was larger than rumor, white blonde hair braided back from a severe face, eyes pale as winter lightning, scar crossing his throat like a crescent claw. No crown, no ornament, but authority worn in the set of his shoulders, and the lethal calm in every stride. He looked at Xavier once, dismissing him, then at her. The instant his gaze locked on hers, heat knifed across her ribs. Her scent shifted under terror, turning sharp and wild, snow and blood, and something newly awake. Sebastian halted mid-step like he'd been struck. His nostrils flared. Shock cracked his composure for one naked heartbeat. A dark mark bloomed beneath the torn collar of his tunic, silver lines crawling over skin at his left rib. Mate. The word rang through the stunned hall from a dozen whispered mouths. Evangeline's body gave out. Stone rushed up. She never hit it. Sebastian caught her with both arms, and when anyone moved closer, his snarl shook frost from the rafters. Sebastian caught her with both arms, and when anyone moved closer, his snarl shook frost from the rafters. Back. His voice was low, not loud, yet it carried to every corner of the hall. All of you. Evangeline clutched his tunic because her hands did not seem to belong to her anymore. Heat poured out of him. Wrong, impossible heat from a man called Frostborn. And where his forearm touched her spine, sparks skipped under her skin like lightning trying to map a path through bone. Her chest still screamed. Not pain now. Pull. A savage, desperate pull toward two opposite points at once. Toward Sebastian's heartbeat under her ear, steady and thunder deep, and toward the chained man on the dais whose black sigils were still dimly lit, as if something inside him strained against iron. Xavier watched her with delighted hunger. "Do you feel it, little vessel?" he called, blood on his teeth. "Do you hear her clawing?" Sebastian's grip tightened. His eyes flashed, truly flashed, pale blue washing to molten gold for a heartbeat before settling into winter steel. He took one sharp inhale against her hair, and she felt the shudder he failed to hide. The mating mark on his left ribs burned brighter, silver lines visible even through torn cloth. Evangeline knew because she could feel its heat from where she was pressed to him, like a brand held too near her own skin. No, no, no. Mates were legends used to soften arranged claims and political pairings. Fated bonds happened in songs, not to hollow girls sold in chains. Yet the inside of her wrist throbbed in answer where his pulse bracketed her, and a strange ache opened low in her belly. Not simple desire, not fear, but a feral recognition that made her want to bare her throat and bite at once. She tried to pull away. His hand slid to the back of her neck, not forcing, just anchoring. "Easy," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "Breathe." "I can't," she rasped. "You can. With me. In 2, 3. He breathed with her, measured, controlled, while the entire hall watched. Out. 2. 3. The command should have felt like dominance. Instead, it felt like a rope dropped to someone drowning. Around them, the silence fractured into whispers. Impossible. Blood Moon tribute. His mark. Garrick stumbled forward from the crowd, one hand pressed to his split mouth. Your Majesty, he said, forcing deference through panic. The girl is unstable. She attacked her escort. Blood Moon requests she be secured at once. Sebastian did not look at him. His gaze stayed on Evangeline's face as if trying to memorize every line. Do you request that? He asked her. No one had asked her what she requested in years. She swallowed. Xavier's sigils pulsed again, and her sternum clenched so hard she gasped. I don't know what's happening. Neither do I, Sebastian said. A muscle jumped in his jaw. But I know what I sent. His thumb brushed the iron collar at her throat, and rage darkened his expression so suddenly she flinched. Not at her. For her. Gold flared in his eyes again. Who collared her? Garrick hesitated. Treaty protocol. Sebastian lifted his head then, and the hall temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Protocol does not supersede my law. At the foot of the dais, Xavier laughed hoarsely. Law? You clutch the shell and call it fate. Ask her why she screams when she sees me, Frost King. Evangeline's body reacted before her mind did. Her fingers dug into Sebastian's sleeve. A sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl, caught in her throat as that impossible second heartbeat slammed once, twice, from across the room. Mine. The wordless cry scraped through her again, female and wild and furious. Sebastian felt her jolt. His gaze snapped to Xavier, murderous and assessing, then returned to her with a focus so intense it bordered reverence. Look at me, he said. She did. For one suspended second the hall vanished. No banners, no blood, no chains. Just his face inches from hers and the bond stretching between them, bright and terrifying as a wire heated white. She felt his restraint like physical pressure, as if he held back entire storms behind locked teeth. I will not let him touch you, he said. The vow landed in her bones. Then she shuddered violently as another wave hit, phantom shift pain tearing down her spine, hips, wrists, as if a wolf she'd never had was trying to break out of skin that had never learned how to open. She cried out. Sebastian moved instantly, sweeping her fully into his arms. Court adjourned, he said, without raising his voice. Now. An elder sputtered. Your Majesty, the treaty adjourned. The word cracked like ice breaking. Marshal, take Stormborn below, triple sigils. If one line fades, you wake me before you breathe again. Steel rang as Frostborn guards obeyed. Garrick took a step after them, but Sebastian's aura surged and pinned him in place. You, Sebastian said to the Blood Moon Beta, will remain under guard until I decide whether you leave here with your tongue. Garrick paled. Evangeline barely tracked it. The world blurred at the edges as Sebastian carried her out of the hall, his cloak falling around her like a second skin. She expected him to hand her to guards, to throw her in a cell, to mark his claim in front of witnesses as every dominant male she had ever known would have done. He did none of it. He took her through a quieter corridor lit by blue witch flame and down a set of steps worn smooth by centuries. The air changed. Damp stone, mineral water, moonlight. The moon pool chamber opened before them, a natural cavern ringed with carved runes, its central pool black-silver beneath an open shaft to the sky. Snowflakes drifted down through the opening and dissolved on warm water. Sebastian set her carefully on a flat stone near the pool's edge and crouched in front of her. His hands hovered by her shoulders, asking without words. She nodded once. He reached up and unbuckled the iron collar. No ceremony, no speech. just metal lifting from her throat with a soft scrape that felt louder than any battle cry. When the collar left her skin, she broke. Pain knifed through her jaw, spine, ankles, every place a shift should have begun and never had. She folded forward with a ragged sound, arms around herself, shaking so hard her teeth knocked together. Sebastian was beside her instantly, wrapping his heavy fur cloak around her shoulders and pulling her against his chest to keep her from striking stone. "I have you," he said. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. A king she'd met moments ago saying, "I have you," like it meant safety, not possession. I'm... She sucked air. "I'm not supposed to hurt like this." I don't shift. His palm flattened between her shoulder blades, heat steady and grounding. "Your body disagrees." Another spasm racked her. She clawed at the cloak. Don't let me." "Shift?" he guessed. She shook her head hard. "Shatter." Silence held for a beat, then, "You won't. Not tonight." He sat on the stone with his back braced against a carved pillar and drew her with him, arranging her so her spine rested along his torso, his legs caging hers without trapping. Every point of contact was deliberate, supportive, restrained. He could have pinned her, could have demanded submission, could have taken advantage of the raw need the bond pumped through both of them. Instead, he counted. In, 2, 3. His voice was roughened now, as if control cost him blood. Out. 2, 3. She tried to match him and failed and tried again. Between waves she felt his heart at her back, slower than hers, implacable, and the rhythm tethered her. Minutes bled into an hour, maybe more. At one point she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He answered without hesitation, "Because you're in pain." That never stopped anyone. His breath caught, almost inaudible. "It stops me." Moonlight shifted across the pool. Somewhere overhead wolves called to one another, distant and mournful. Each call sliced through her with aching familiarity and yet not, as if she recognized a language she had never been taught. Sebastian kept counting. When she trembled less, he loosened his hold but did not move away. She became acutely aware of his body, of the clean, cold scent of snow and cedar under steel, of his thigh against hers, of the place at her throat, where the mating pull pulsed harder every time he exhaled near her skin. Fear and hunger braided together until she couldn't tell one from the other. "I don't trust this," she said into the dark water. "You shouldn't," he replied. "Not yet." She turned her head to look up at him. He looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, jaw rough with evening stubble, and still terrifyingly controlled. "Then why tell me to breathe with you?" she asked. "Because I don't understand why fate chose this moment either," he said. "But I know this. No one touches you without my leave. No one questions you while you're like this. If you want distance, you will have it. If you want guards, you will have them. If you want me gone, say it and I go." No male had ever offered her that kind of choice. She searched his face for mockery and found none. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed at the chamber entrance. A woman in frostborn martial leathers stopped at the rune line and bowed. "My king. Council demands immediate hearing. The Blood Moon escort is protesting detention. They claim treaty breach." Sebastian's expression cooled to ice. "Tell Council I attend when my mate stands steady." The marshal's gaze flicked to Evangeline, sharp but not unkind. "Some elders are unsettled by that term, sire." "Then let them be unsettled." The woman thumped fist to chest and withdrew. "Mate." The word still made Evangeline's pulse stutter. "You said it like it's certain." "It is." His eyes met hers, unflinching. "The bond does not lie." "What if I do?" A pause. "Then I will learn why." No anger, no threat. Just stark honesty. She looked away first. By the time he finally stood, her shaking had faded to occasional tremors. He offered his hand rather than taking her arm. She stared at it, then placed her palm in his. Electricity leapt skin to skin. They both hissed. He almost smiled. Brief, incredulous, gone. That may happen for a while. A while? Until the bond settles. Or until we do. He led her from the moon pool not to a dungeon but to a chamber adjoining his own war room, guarded by 2 female sentries instead of men. Fresh clothes lay folded by the hearth. A tray of broth steamed on the table. At the threshold, he stopped. You can lock this door from inside. Only 3 people in this fortress can override it. Me, Marshal Sarah, and the healer. None will enter without warning unless you are dying. Evangeline stared. You expect me to believe that? I expect nothing from you tonight. He stepped back. Rest if you can. Council at dawn. Why dawn? Because if I delay longer, they'll come here and force the issue. His mouth thinned. I would rather choose the battleground. When he turned to leave, she heard herself ask, Sebastian? He looked over his shoulder. If they say I'm a spy, she said quietly, will you believe them? His answer came like steel laid on stone. I believe what I saw in that hall. Fear, pain, and you running from men who called themselves your own. Then he was gone, and the lock clicked into place from the outside first, then released with an intentional metallic thunk so she could set it herself. She stood for a long moment in the silent room, hand at her bare throat where the collar had been. At dawn, the council chamber smelled of pine resin, ink, and old hostility. Sebastian sat at the head of a crescent stone table, not on a throne, but in a plain, high-backed chair that somehow looked more absolute. Evangeline sat at his right, wrapped again in his fur cloak over borrowed gray linen. Her wrists were unbound. The absence felt obscene and fragile. Around them, elders from Frostborn, Bloodmoon, and 2 allied packs watched her as if she might sprout claws and kill them all before breakfast. Garrick stood under guard near the door, mouth stitched by a healer's neat work where she had split it. He glared at her with pure hate. An elder with braided white hair and amber eyes slapped a stack of parchment onto the table. Evidence from border shrines, she said. Stormborn sigils, severance rites, missing pups, and now your mate. The word dripped skepticism. Collapses at first sight of the cult prophet and howls like bonded prey. Explain. Evangeline opened her mouth. Nothing came. How did she explain a heartbeat from another body? A voice in her marrow? Sebastian answered before anyone could press. She owes this chamber no testimony while recovering. A Blood Moon counselor leaned forward, rings flashing. Convenient. My pack delivered a compliant tribute, not a destabilizing witch link to Stormborn. If she is compromised, she must be executed before eclipse season. The word executed landed coldly in Evangeline's gut. Old instinct told her to lower her head, make herself small, survive. She did neither. I am not your tribute anymore, she said, voice hoarse but clear. Murmurs rippled. Garrick barked a laugh through his stitches. Listen to it. One night in Frostborn furs and she forgets what she is. Sebastian's hand flattened on the table once. Silence snapped back. The amber-eyed elder studied Evangeline. Did Xavier Stormborn ever have contact with you before tonight? No. True, as far as she knew. Did you serve Hollow Moon cells within Blood Moon territory? No. Do you carry cult marks? Evangeline hesitated. Not that I know of. Not good enough, said another elder. Search her. 2 warriors stepped forward immediately. Evangeline stiffened. The room tilted toward old terror, hands pinning her, voices saying, hold her down. Sebastian rose. He did not shout. He did not slam fists. He stood, and power peeled off him in a visible wave. Frost traced the edges of the stone table. Several elders gasped as their wolves dropped belly low under the force of his aura. His canines lengthened, claws tipped from his fingers. His eyes burned full gold. "Sit," he said to the warriors. They froze mid-step. "I gave an order last night," Sebastian continued, each word precise as a blade. "No one touches her without my leave. You were all present." The Blood Moon counselor bristled. "This is council authority, not your bedchamber." Sebastian turned his head slowly toward him, half-shifted and lethal. "Harming my mate is treason under Frostborn law. Treason is punishable by exile and death." His gaze swept the table. "That law now extends to every allied pack under my protection until this matter is resolved. Challenge it, and you challenge me." No one breathed. Even Garrick looked suddenly uncertain. Evangeline sat very still, pulse hammering, and watched men who had dismissed her all her life refuse to meet Sebastian's eyes. The amber-eyed elder was first to recover. "You would risk interpack war for a girl you met 12 hours ago?" Sebastian's expression did not change. "I would end one to keep my word." Something in Evangeline cracked, not from pain this time, but from the unfamiliar shape of being defended without being diminished. He had not called her weak, had not hidden her. He had drawn a line around her, and dared the world to cross it. No one crossed. After a long silence, the elder inclined her head a fraction. "Very well. No physical search. But we require magical verification. Moonpool witness right, at minimum." Sebastian considered, then looked to Evangeline. "Your choice." Again that impossible thing. Choice. She wet her lips. "If I refuse, I refuse with you." The answer came so fast it startled a small, disbelieving laugh out of her before she could stop it. She swallowed it, then straightened in her chair. "I'll do the right," she said. "I want answers too." Sebastian nodded once, pride flickering warm and fierce across the bond. "Then we proceed at dusk, under my guard." Council began to argue logistics, sigil circles, witness numbers. Evangeline barely heard. Her attention snagged on the way Sebastian resumed his seat, not between her and the room, but beside her, leaving her visible, present, included. Not cargo, not shame, not hollow. Danger still coiled everywhere. In Xavier's smile burned behind her eyes, in the phantom heartbeat that still echoed from below the fortress, in the knowledge that one wrong step could get them both killed. But when she shifted in her chair, Sebastian's knuckles brushed hers beneath the table, brief and asking. She did not pull away. She did not pull away. Under the table, Sebastian's thumb brushed once over her knuckles, barely contact, but enough to send a spark up her arm and settle the trembling in her chest for one fragile breath. Then the chamber doors opened and Marshal Sarah strode in, frost still clinging to her braids. She bowed to Sebastian and did not bother to hide the urgency in her voice. "Stormborn is demanding audience," she said, "with both of you." A dozen elders started talking at once. "Denied. Absolutely not. It could be a trap." Sebastian's gaze stayed on Sarah. "Has he said why?" "He claims you'll want to hear his prophecy before dusk." Sarah's jaw tightened. "He also said, and I quote, 'Bring the hollow girl, or I'll make her howl through the floors until your stones crack.'" Evangeline's stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished. Right on cue, that second heartbeat slammed once beneath her sternum, hard enough to steal air. Sebastian stood. Council recess. 1 hour. The amber-eyed elder snapped. "You cannot indulge cult theatrics." "I can do what keeps my fortress standing," he said, already moving. He glanced at Evangeline. "With me?" Fear screamed no. The ache in her chest screamed yes. She rose on unsteady legs. "With you." The lower vault smelled like wet iron and old storms. 6 sigil chains held Xavier Stormborn to a black stone post sunk into the center of a circular cell. Runes crawled over the walls, pulsing in alternating patterns. Frostborn warding over hollow moon suppression glyphs, copied from captured cult texts. Two were already dimmer than they had been in the hall. Xavier lifted his head as they entered and smiled like a man greeting dinner guests. There was dried blood at the corner of his mouth. His gray eyes were bright, fevered, delighted. "Ah," he said softly, "King Winter and my stolen moon." Sebastian stepped in front of Evangeline by instinct. "Speak quickly." Xavier laughed. "Still pretending you can shield her from herself? Charming." Sarah signaled, and 3 wardens braced silver-tipped spears at the threshold. No one crossed the inner rune line except Sebastian and Evangeline. Evangeline could feel Sebastian's rage rolling off him in cold waves, could also feel the iron restraint wrapped tight around it. All for her. Xavier watched that too. "She doesn't know, does she?" he asked. "All those years calling her hollow, and no one ever told her she was carved." Evangeline's pulse stuttered. "Carved? From cradle flesh." Xavier tilted his head, mock sympathetic. "You were 6 breaths old when Midwife Fell opened your spirit seam. Tiny thing. Loud lungs." Sebastian went still in a way more frightening than movement. "Name." Xavier ignored him, speaking only to Evangeline now, voice almost tender. "Your wolf came out silver black, claws first. Beautiful. Furious. We bound her in eclipse thread and sold the bundle to me before your mother could wake." The world narrowed to a roaring point. "No," Evangeline whispered, though the word had no weight. "Yes." Xavier's smile widened. "Prophecy is expensive, especially the kind that says a blood moon she-wolf, mated to a frostborn king, would unite the packs and end old blood trade. Empires don't survive unity, little vessel. Men like me don't survive it." Sebastian's voice cut in, blade flat. "What did you do with her?" "Put her where destiny couldn't reach." Xavier's chained hands flexed against the post, black sigils flaring over his chest. "Inside me." Evangeline swayed. Sebastian's hand found her lower back, steadying. Xavier watched that hand and bared his teeth. "There it is. The tether. You feel it now, don't you? Her heartbeat in me. His claim on you. 2 pulls, opposite directions." His eyes gleamed. "By blood eclipse, I'll make that pull tear you in half." Sarah cursed under her breath. Sebastian took 1 step closer to the inner line. "Explain." Xavier's voice dropped to priestly cadence. "At Eclipse Peak, we open the Red Gate. I sacrifice original hosts tied to marked bloodlines. Their wolves sever permanently. Bodies remain alive, obedient, empty. No mates, no rebellion, no old gods whispering in bone, just vessels." He looked straight at Evangeline when he said the last word. "Your wolf is my keystone. Through her, I can snap every blood moon line first, then Frostborn, then anyone tied by treaty. Whole territories of breathing husks." He chuckled. "Imagine your council meetings then. So efficient." Sebastian's aura slammed outward, cracking frost across the nearest wall. Wardens dropped to 1 knee. "Try," Sebastian said quietly, "and I will feed your spine to ravens." Xavier licked blood from his lip. "You think this starts at Eclipse? It started 22 years ago." He inhaled sharply, and every sigil on his body ignited. Evangeline screamed. Something ripped through the room, not physical, not wind, but spirit force, a tearing howl that made stone hum. From the center of Xavier's chest, a shape pushed outward through skin like moonlight forced through black glass. A wolf's head first, spectral and silver-veined, jaws open in silent agony. Black chains of sigil ink wrapped its throat, shoulders, forelegs, dragging it back each time it lunged. Its eyes found Evangeline. Recognition hit like a blow. Mine. Not a word. A soul cry. Evangeline stumbled forward without meaning to. Sebastian caught her around the waist before she crossed the line. The spectral wolf strained harder, claws scraping sparks from nothing. Xavier gasped, sweating now, grin gone feral with effort. See? She remembers. Nye! The name tore at Evangeline's tongue, half-formed, unknown and intimate. Stop, stop, you're hurting her. Xavier barked a laugh that turned into a cough. The projection snapped backward, sucked into his chest as the chains recoiled. He sagged against the post, panting. Silence crashed down. Evangeline shook so hard her teeth clicked. Sebastian held her with one arm and never took his eyes off Xavier. You will not survive what I do to you, Sebastian said. Xavier raised his head slowly. Then hurry, King. Your wards are already bleeding. He turned his face toward the ceiling and whispered almost lovingly, The moon rises hungry. By the time they reached the upper corridor, alarms were already sounding. Not battle horns, ward chimes. 3 rapid strikes. Pause. 3 rapid strikes. Breach pattern. Sarah met them at the stair with a strip of hide in her hand, chalked in black symbols. Found under the council table, she said. Fresh. Blood-inked. Sebastian took it, nostrils flaring. Whose blood? Unknown. Human, maybe wolf. Labs testing. He handed it back. Lock all inner gates. Sweep for matching marks. No one leaves. No one enters. Sarah looked to Evangeline, then back to him. And her? With me. Evangeline expected argument. Sarah only nodded and sprinted away. The fortress shifted into war motion around them. Boots pounding, commands echoing, steel drawn. Servants were herded into side halls for identification. Emissaries protested. Elders demanded control and got none. Every 20 paces, Evangeline felt that phantom heartbeat thud from below, as if Xavier were testing the leash. Sebastian kept close without crowding, one hand sometimes hovering near her elbow, never grabbing unless she faltered. It should have made her feel managed. Instead, it made her feel accompanied, which was somehow worse, because now there was something to lose. In the strategy room, maps were thrown open over the central table. Red wax pins marked old cult sightings. Blue marked missing pups. New black pins started appearing as scouts reported fresh sigil traces carved into waystones, grain bins, even the underside of a nursery crib in the lower village. He had help inside these walls, Sarah said grimly. A frostborn elder slammed his fist down. Then purge every blood moon guest. Garrick, now guarded in a corner, gave a nasty little smile. Do it. Blame us all. Save Stormborn the effort. Evangeline stared at him. Did you know? His stitched mouth twitched. Know what? That you were cursed? Everyone knew that. Before she could answer, a messenger rushed in and dropped to one knee. My king. 2 wardens dead in the east culvert. Throats cut. 1 cult brand burned into the stone. Eclipse crescent over split fang. Sebastian's expression did not change, but the air in the room went razor thin. Body count all posts. Double the Moonpool guard. The messenger hesitated. Already done, sire. Also, village reports say livestock are being found blood-drained. No tracks. Xavier's disciples were moving. Evangeline wrapped her arms around herself against a chill that came from nowhere. Blood for ink. Marks under tables. Dead wardens inside sealed walls. She had thought she was the threat in the room. She was the target. And everyone she stood near was now in range. Sebastian noticed the shift in her breathing and leaned closer. Stay with me. I am with you, she said, then heard the tremor in her own voice and hated it. His eyes softened for a fraction. I know. Orders flew for another hour. Dusk crept toward the windows in bruised purples and iron blue. The Moonpool witness rite, delayed by emergency, was pushed to moonrise with reduced attendees. Sebastian, Sarah, the amber-eyed elder, 2 neutral witnesses, 1 rune healer. When finally the room emptied, Evangeline remained by the map table, fingers braced on carved wood, trying not to fold. Sebastian poured water into a cup and held it out. "Drink." She took it, swallowed, and set it down with careful control. "If I weren't here, none of this would be happening in your fortress." "If you weren't here," he said, "Stormborn would still be planning it unseen." She gave him a brittle look. "Comfort is not your strongest skill, is it?" His mouth almost curved. "No." A beat. "Truth is." They stepped out onto a narrow stone balcony off the war room while runners changed watch below. Snow had started again, soft and relentless, dusting Sebastian's shoulders white. For the first time all day, no one spoke at them, over them, around them. Evangeline stood at the parapet, staring at the dark pines beyond the walls. "When I was 12, she said abruptly, "my pack healer told me Moon Goddess rejects cowards, said that's why no wolf came." She laughed once, humorless. "I trained until my feet bled trying to prove I wasn't afraid." Sebastian said nothing, waiting. "At 16, they stopped letting me join hunts. At 19, pups started asking if I was contagious." Her fingers tightened on frozen stone. "This morning they chained me like an infected animal and called it diplomacy." Wind tugged loose strands of her hair. She did not look at him. "I kept thinking," she said softly, "if I just obeyed long enough, they'd see me as useful. Worth keeping." Sebastian moved beside her, close enough that their sleeves brushed. "They saw you," he said. "They chose cruelty anyway." Something hot stung behind her eyes. She blinked hard. "I don't know how to be this person you keep defending." "The one with choices?" She nodded. "You practice," he said. She turned then, searching his face. "What about you? You make it sound easy." A dry huff left him. "It isn't." He rested both hands on the parapet, gaze on the mountains instead of her. "I was born second son. Trained to command armies, not packs. My brother was crowned at 17. His jaw tightened. "He accepted a political mate to secure grain routes. She died carrying their first child. He followed her into winter madness and took half our warriors with him in one storm charge." Evangeline had heard fragments of that history, never from him. "I took the throne at 23, Sebastian continued. "Spent the next century ending vendettas we inherited like heirlooms. Every alliance offered daughters. Every elder called it duty." He looked at her then, pale eyes stripped bare. "My wolf refused everyone." Her breath caught. "I thought him stubborn," he said. "Turns out he was waiting." The bond flared warm, aching, undeniable. He lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to refuse, and touched 2 fingers to the side of her throat where the collar bruises still shadowed skin. Heat followed his calluses. His voice dropped. "I cannot promise easy," he said. "I cannot promise safety every hour. But I can promise this. No cages. Not from them. Not from me." Evangeline closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she leaned into his hand. Just that. Just enough to feel the tremor he hid from everyone else. When she opened her eyes again, they were closer than before. His gaze flicked once to her mouth, then back up in a question he did not voice. She was still deciding when the ward chimes shrieked continuous, high and panicked. Sarah's voice thundered from inside. "Moonpool breach! Move!" Sebastian swore and spun. Evangeline was already running. The Moonpool chamber was chaos. Rune healer Priam lay slumped against the far wall, unconscious, blood matting his temple. One witness was dead at the waterline, throat opened to the spine. The other crouched, shaking behind a pillar, hands over ears. Across the ruined floor, black sigils had been painted in a spiral over the original carvings, fresh, wet, shimmering like oil. They converged at the pool's edge. At the center of that spiral stood Xavier. He should have been 6 levels below in a chained cell. Now he wore only 2 broken sigil cuffs, wrists flayed where he'd ripped free. 5 cultists in ash-gray robes ringed him with hooked blades, chanting under their breath. Their eyes were milk-white, pupils burned out with ritual. Sarah slammed into one cultist before he could turn and snapped his neck. Frostborn guards piled through both entrances, steel singing. "Alive if possible!" Sebastian roared. "Stormborn is mine!" Xavier smiled at him and sliced his own palm with a moon-forged shard. Blood hit the black spiral and hissed. Evangeline felt it like a hook under her breastbone. She doubled over, choking. Sebastian reached for her. "Eva!" The nearest cultist lunged between them. Sebastian tore him aside with one-handed force that cracked ribs, but the half-second was enough. Xavier pressed his bleeding hand to the floor sigil and spoke a word in old ritual tongue. Every black line on the stone ignited. Evangeline's cut hand from council paperwork, barely a nick she hadn't noticed reopening, burned white-hot. Blood beaded instantly and ran down her palm in thin red threads that lifted off her skin, drawn through the air toward the spiral like magnet filings. "No," she gasped. Xavier's voice rang over clashing steel. "Original host answers first blood." The pool exploded upward in a column of silver-black water. Within it, the spectral she-wolf appeared again, larger this time, fully formed to the shoulders, screaming soundlessly as chain sigils cinched her throat. "Mine," it cried to Evangeline, frantic, breaking. "Find me." Evangeline took a step toward the pool before she could stop herself. Sebastian grabbed her wrist. Their bond slammed bright and painful. "Stay with me." "I can't. She's—" Another pull yanked her forward so hard her shoulder wrenched. "He's using me as anchor." Around them, guards fought cultists in brutal close quarters. Sarah took a blade to the side and kept moving. One cultist reached the wall and smashed a glass vial. Black smoke billowed, eating runes as it touched. The chamber wards began to fail. Xavier backed toward the pool, blood streaming from his palm, grin ecstatic and wild. "Blood eclipse comes early, Frost King. Chase me into the dark if you dare." He stepped backward into the water column. The sigil chains wrapped the spectral wolf and vanished beneath the surface with him. At the same instant, black threads shot from the spiral and wrapped Evangeline's bleeding hand, climbing her forearm like living ink. She screamed as the force jerked her off her feet toward the churning pool. Sebastian lunged, caught her around the waist. And the stone beneath them split with a thunderous crack, moon pool water and darkness opening like a mouth. And the stone beneath them split with a thunderous crack, moon pool water and darkness opening like a mouth. Sebastian twisted in mid-fall, taking the impact as they crashed through shattered rune slate into black air and spray. Evangeline hit his chest, then rock, then water hard enough to drive sound from her lungs. Freezing shock knifed through her body. They did not land in the moon pool. They landed in something far older. A cavern yawned below the fortress, cathedral-wide and ribbed with natural obsidian pillars. Above, the broken moon pool glimmered like a torn eye. Below, red fire burned in trench channels carved into the floor, outlining an enormous ritual circle that pulsed in time with Xavier's blood. The blood eclipse had begun. Not full totality, yet. But the moonlight pouring through cracks overhead had gone rust dark, and every shadow in the chamber leaned inward toward the circle's center. An altar stone carved with the same split-fang sigil she had seen in nightmares she never understood. Cultists waited there. Not 5, dozens. Some wore ash-gray robes, others wore stolen pack leathers, badges ripped off. All carried blades carved with black runes. Their chant rolled through the cavern in a low, nauseating hum that made Evangeline's teeth ache. Xavier stood on the altar dais, soaked and grinning, blood still running from his palm into channels that fed the circle. Sigils crawled over his chest like worms under skin. "Welcome," he called, voice magnified by stone, to the cradle where gods are rewritten. Sebastian rose in one fluid motion, shoving Evangeline behind him as 6 cultists rushed them. He shifted halfway with a snarl that shook grit from the pillars, claws, fangs, gold eyes, and met the first wave head-on. Bone cracked, blood sprayed black in eclipse light. "Stay behind me," he barked. Another black thread snapped from the ritual circle and whipped around Evangeline's forearm, yanking her sideways. She slammed into a pillar, vision flashing. More threads followed, snaring her ankle, wrist, throat. Not physical rope, but sigil force that burned wherever it touched. Sebastian tore one strand apart with his hand. It reformed instantly and doubled. "Damn it, Sarah!" he roared upward toward the breach. From above came answering war cries. Frostborn guards were rappelling through broken stone on chains and grapples, dropping into the cavern perimeter where cult archers already waited. Steel hit steel. Sarah landed hard with blood on her side and 2 axes out, and drove into the flank line like winter vengeance. Battle detonated around the outer ring. Inside the circle, Xavier spread his arms. "You can't brute force prophecy, Frost King. You never could." He slammed both bleeding hands onto the altar. The entire sigil network flared. Evangeline screamed as the threads on her body went molten and hauled her across the floor toward the center. Sebastian lunged, caught her hand, and for one impossible second they held against opposite pulls. His grip flesh and heat, Xavier's pull black fire and old theft. The skin of her palm tore open, blood hit the inner ring. The circle accepted her. Force exploded outward, throwing Sebastian back into 2 charging cultists. He hit stone, rolled, rose again, but a wall of black flames surged up between him and the altar, fed by Xavier's blood and the eclipse overhead. "Ava." His voice came hoarse through the roar. He struck the flame barrier with both hands, his skin smoked. She was dragged onto the altar platform, knees slamming stone. And then she saw Nira. The spectral wolf hung above the altar now, fully manifest from Xavier's chest to shoulder and spine, her hindquarters still trapped inside him as if his body were a cage of meat and sigils. Black chains cinched her throat and ribs. Her eyes were silver black and feral, and full of unbearable recognition. Mine. The soul cry hit Evangeline so hard she almost blacked out. Xavier crouched in front of her, close enough that she smelled rot and copper. "There you are," he whispered. "My hollow saint." He gripped her jaw. She tried to bite him. He laughed and tightened until pain sparked along her teeth. "Listen carefully. At total eclipse, I cut your heart on this stone. Your wolf tears free in the same stroke. Her power opens the red gate. Every marked bloodline snaps." His thumb smeared her blood over her own lips. "You die useful for once." Beyond the flame barrier, Sebastian ripped a cultist apart and bellowed her name again. Sarah's command voice answered from the perimeter. Guard lines were holding, but barely. Xavier stood and raised his blade toward the darkening moonlight. "Begin final verse." The chamber chant rose. The black chains around Nira tightened. Evangeline's vision tunneled. Panic surged up, old and familiar. Submit, survive, disappear. Then Nira looked at her again. Not pleading, not helpless. Furious. A memory not her own flashed through her. Teeth on chain, claws on stone, 22 years of caged rage. Not hollow, stolen. Evangeline planted her bleeding palm on the altar and dragged in one ragged breath. No more cages. "Sebastian!" Her scream cut through battle noise. He looked up, blood to his elbows, eyes wild with terror. "Trust me," she shouted. His whole body went rigid. "No." A cultist lunged at his blind side. He tore the man's throat out without looking away from her. Evangeline pushed to her feet on shaking legs inside the inner sigil ring. Black fire licked at her ankles. Xavier watched with delighted curiosity, expecting collapse. Instead, she lifted her chin. You said only the original host can reclaim a severed soul, she said. You were bragging. Xavier's smile thinned. I was teaching. Then teach this. She seized the moon-forged shard lying on the altar, his blade, and slashed her own palm deeper from thumb to wrist. White pain flared. Blood poured hot and bright. Sebastian slammed both fists into the flame wall. Ava, stop. She met his gaze through heat shimmer. You told me I had choices. His face twisted with helpless fury. This is mine. She dropped to one knee and pressed her bleeding hand over the nearest black sigil carved into Xavier's chest where he stood too stunned to move quickly. Her blood hissed on contact. Smoke rose. He snarled and backhanded her. She tasted iron, held on. With her other hand, she smeared blood across the next sigil, then the next, tracing shapes that came from nowhere and everywhere. Curves and hooks she had seen in dreams over black water. Old blood moon runes older than cult script. The sigils bucked under her fingers like live wires. Xavier grabbed her throat. Kneel! She laughed, feral and shaking. I already did. Then she shouted into his chest, into the chains, into her own bones. Naira! The name cracked the cavern. The spectral wolf reared, throwing her head back with a silent roar that became sound. Real, deafening, wild. The black chains flashed, split, rewove. Evangeline drove both hands into Xavier's blazing chest sigils, as if into ice water and fire at once. Something grabbed her from the inside. She pulled. It was not graceful. It was not ritual perfect. It was blood, screaming, tendons tearing, soul against theft. Xavier shrieked and clawed at her arms, trying to pry her free, trying to force her down to the altar stone. You can't hold her, he howled. You're human. Watch me. Outside the inner ring, Sebastian rallied his guard with a roar and broke the flame wall at one point, then another. Sarah drove 3 spears into the breach and held it open with burning hands, while wolves poured through to engage the cultists circling the dais. Evangeline felt none of it clearly. She was inside the pole now, drowning in silver-black force that tasted like winter wind and blood, and home she'd never had. Naira slammed forward through Xavier's torn sigils and through Evangeline's chest in a blinding surge. Every bone in Evangeline's body broke, every bone remade. She arched backward, screaming as shift fire ripped down her spine. Claws punched from her hands. Jaw cracked and lengthened, skin split under racing fur, silver black and midnight. Her senses detonated. 10,000 cents. Heartbeats. Fear sweat. Steel. Sebastian's blood. Xavier's rot. Then she landed on 4 paws on the altar stone for the first time in her life. Naira was not beside her. Naira was her. Power flooded muscle and marrow so violently she nearly fell. Instead, she threw back her head and howled, a full, living, triumphant sound that blasted through the cavern and up the moonpool shaft into the night. Cultists flinched. Some dropped their weapons outright. Xavier staggered back, hands clamped over his chest where sigils were unraveling like burnt cloth. No, he rasped. No, no, no! Evangeline, wolf-formed and huge, bared her teeth and sprang. He ran. For 3 stumbling steps, Xavier tried to run from the altar as the ritual lines under his feet reversed direction, sucking inward toward the wound where Naira had been torn free. His skin split along old carving seams from sternum to hip, black light leaking out. Sebastian intercepted him like an avalanche. He hit Xavier mid-stride, drove him across stone, and pinned him to the base of the altar with one forearm across his throat. Claws pricked skin but did not strike deeper. Mine to finish? Sebastian asked, voice raw, eyes on Evangeline's wolf. Evangeline skidded to a halt in front of them, chest heaving. Around the dais, the remaining cultists were being disarmed, killed, or forced to their knees by Frostborn and allied warriors. Sarah, bleeding and grinning wolf sharp, kicked one chanting priest unconscious and shouted for binders. Xavier looked from Sebastian to Evangeline and started laughing wetly. "Look at you," he coughed. "A crown dog after all." Evangeline's wolf snarled so low the stone vibrated. She stepped back, and shift rippled again. Painful, controlled this time. Bones shortened, fur withdrew. In moments she stood human, naked and blood-slick and shaking, with Sebastian's torn cloak tossed over her shoulders by a guard who dared not meet her eyes. At the altar's edge lay a dagger in a ceremonial sheath of black hide, crescent pommel, moon-forged blade etched with infant severance runes. Xavier saw her reach for it and for the first time looked afraid. "No," he hissed, "that is sacred." "It's yours," she said, voice hoarse. "You used it on newborns." Sebastian did not move his arm from Xavier's throat. Evangeline stepped close enough that Xavier had to tilt his head back to see her. Blood from her palm dripped onto his exposed heart sigil, now cracked and flickering. He spat red at her feet. "You were meant to be empty." She drove the dagger down through the heart sigil to the hilt. "I was meant to be whole." Xavier convulsed once, mouth opening on a broken breath. Sebastian leaned in, eyes winter cold. "And you were meant to fall." Black light burst from the wound. Sigils across the cavern walls went dark in a domino wave. Every surviving cult brand on every captured body began to smoke and peel away, like ash in rain. Xavier Stormborn screamed exactly one heartbeat longer, then his body caved inward along the ritual lines he had carved into others. Flesh, bone, and shadow collapsed to gray ash that scattered on the altar stones. The eclipse light shifted. Above, the moon's red edge began to brighten back toward silver. Around the chamber, wolves who had been trembling under unseen pressure straightened as if a weight had lifted from their spines. One young guard burst into tears. Another started laughing in disbelief. Evangeline stood over the ash, dagger still in her hand, and shook. Sebastian rose slowly beside her and placed his palm over the hand gripping the dagger until her fingers unclenched. He took the blade, set it on the stone, and cupped her face with both hands. "Eva." She looked at him. Gold still burned in his eyes. Blood streaked his throat. He looked like war and relief, and hunger all at once. "Are you with me?" he asked. Through the bond, she felt his terror ebbing, his awe rising, his need held tight on a leash of respect. She nodded once. "I'm here." By the time they climbed back through the shattered moon pool chamber, dawn was smearing pale light over the eastern peaks. Healers moved among the wounded. Priam was awake and cursing. Sarah got stitched in a chair while giving orders and threatening anyone who fussed over her. The amber-eyed elder stood at the rune line, silent, watching Evangeline emerge wrapped in Sebastian's cloak with wet hair and new scars, and eyes that were no longer empty. No one called her hollow. In Sebastian's private chamber, the door shut with final quiet. For several breaths they simply looked at each other. The bond hummed between them now, no longer jagged static but a living chord, warm, deep, aching with unfinished claim. Evangeline could feel where his control frayed at the edges, could feel the same answering hunger in herself, threaded with exhaustion and fierce certainty. Sebastian stepped closer, then stopped an arm's length away. "I need words from you," he said, voice rougher than she had ever heard. "Not fate, not instinct. You." She swallowed. "What words?" "That you choose this." His hands were open at his sides, claws retracted with visible effort. "Me, now that you are whole." Tears pricked unexpectedly. "You think I'd leave?" "I think you owe no one your life." His throat worked. and I will not take what is not freely given. Not even this. The old world would have called that weakness in a king. Evangeline stepped into him and put her hand over his heart. I choose you, she said, in full. His eyes closed briefly like pain and prayer were the same thing. When he opened them, they were molten gold. Then may I mark you? She tilted her head, exposing the junction of neck and shoulder where pulse leapt hard. Yes. He made a sound low in his chest, gratitude, hunger, reverence, and slid one hand to cradle the back of her skull. The other braced at her waist, steadying, never forcing. He lowered his mouth to her skin first and breathed her in, lips barely brushing the mark point. Heat spiraled outward in widening rings. Then his teeth pierced. Pain flashed bright and sharp. 2 points sinking through skin, through fear, through every old chain memory, and transformed almost instantly into molten relief that flooded her limbs. The bond surged open. She felt his devotion like a blade laid down at her feet, his possessive wolf kneeling not in submission but in vow, his centuries of cold cracking to let her in. Mine, he whispered against her throat, voice breaking. Evangeline clutched his shoulders as pleasure and ache braided through her spine. Yours, she breathed back, and felt the word seal the first half of something ancient. Sebastian released the bite slowly, tongue soothing the wound, forehead resting to hers while both of them shook. Your turn, he said, almost dazed. If you want it. If not, I wait. She answered by pushing him back one step toward the bedpost, not hard, just decisive. His laugh came out wrecked. Bossy Luna, he murmured. Your fault, she said, and rose on her toes to mount the seam where neck met shoulder, where his scent was strongest and pulse thundered. He bared his throat without hesitation. Consent, trust, choice. She bit. His whole body arched with a harsh gasp. Power snapped across the room like lightning finding ground. She tasted blood and winter and wild cedar, tasted the exact shape of him. The pain in her jaw flared, then melted into fierce, pulsing pleasure that answered his mark with equal force. Mine, she whispered into his skin. Yours, he growled, hands fisting in her hair and at her back, careful even while shaking. The second mark closed the circuit. The bond slammed fully into place with the sensation of thunder wrapped in silk. Violent, soft, inevitable. Their heartbeats synchronized, staggered, synchronized again. Emotion poured both ways unfiltered. His awe at her first howl, her terror when the floor split, his pride when she chose the altar, her feral joy when Naira ran, his ancient loneliness, her lifelong ache of exile, both of them flooded by a relief so profound it hurt. Mate. The word rose from both throats at once, half laugh, half sob. Mate, he echoed, forehead to hers. Mate. They held each other as the bond settled from wildfire to steady flame. Sebastian traced the new mark at her throat with reverent fingertips as if memorizing sacred script. Evangeline brushed the bite at his shoulder and felt his wolf rumble contentment through the link. No chains, she whispered. He kissed her brow, then her marked throat. No cages. Only us. Only us. He gathered her into the bedfurs, not with urgency now, but with a tenderness that undid her more thoroughly than battle. They lay tangled, breathing each other in, the new marks warm and throbbing in matched rhythm until sleep finally claimed them both. 3 nights later, under a full silver moon, the great hall filled again, not for tribute, for covenant. Banners of 5 packs hung side by side at equal height. The obsidian throne had been moved back. In its place stood a circular dais of joined woods. Pine, ash, rowan, blood oak, cut from each territory. At its center burned a low ceremonial fire. Evangeline entered beside Sebastian wearing white-gray leathers stitched with silver thread and no collar, no veil. The mark at her throat glowed faintly in moonlight. His answered at the shoulder above his formal clasp. Wolves bowed as they passed, not to him alone, to both. Sarah, arm-bound but upright, read charges first. Captured cultists were named, judged, and either imprisoned under anti-sigil wards or executed for murder. Midwife Vel, dragged from a border hideout at dawn, confessed to infant severance rites before being sentenced to life in Moon Iron beneath neutral guard. Garrick was brought forward in chains. He looked smaller without pack colors, split mouth healed into a crooked line. He avoided Evangeline's eyes until forced to face her. The amber-eyed elder spoke for tribunal. Garrick of Bloodmoon, you are found guilty of trafficking pack-kin as unlawful tribute beyond treaty scope, conspiracy with cult couriers, and attempted murder of protected mate under Allied law. Sentence is death or exile stripped of name. High Luna, choice is yours. The title struck the hall like a bell. High Luna. Evangeline stepped down from the dais and stopped in front of Garrick. For a moment she saw the man who had laughed while chaining her. Saw also the pack system that had made him possible. Look at me, she said. He did, finally, hatred and fear warring in his face. You called me hollow so often you believed it, she said quietly. I won't build this new law in your image. She turned to the tribunal. Exile. Name stripped. Brand him with Oathbreak's sigil and send him beyond the northern glaciers. If he crosses Allied borders again, kill him on sight. Garrick lunged. Guards slammed him down and dragged him out to the roar of formal assent. Next came the Covenant itself. The amber-eyed elder, who finally gave her name, Elder Maelys, laid parchment on the firelit stand. By unanimous vote of allied pacts, all daughter tribute treaties are dissolved and forbidden. No wolf, child, or grown may be traded as payment, leverage, or breeding asset. Violation invokes united military response. She looked at Evangeline, then Sebastian. Sign. Sebastian signed first, sharp decisive stroke. Evangeline signed second. Evangeline Bloodmoon Frostborn. Then paused, added one more line beneath in darker ink. High Luna of the United Territories. Cheers broke, not polite but wild. Wolves pounded fists to chests. Some cried openly. In the side gallery, restored captives from cult cells watched with stunned faces, among them 3 adolescents who had regained wolves only yesterday when Xavier's network died. One girl met Evangeline's eyes and touched her own throat mark, smiling through tears. Sebastian leaned close. Ready? For what? He nodded toward the waiting circlet on the stand. Not a queen's crown, but a lunar diadem forged in interlocking pack sigils, open at the front like a rising moon. Evangeline lifted it herself and set it on her own head. The hall exploded. Sebastian's smile was rare and devastating when it came. He bowed to her, full formal depth, king to equal. She hauled him upright by his lapels and kissed him to a chorus of laughter and howls. Later, after oaths and feasting and too many toasts, they escaped to the repaired Moonpool balcony where snow drifted soft and clean. Below, trainees from rescued litters chased each other between torch lines, while Sarah barked drills one-handed and Priam complained loudly about everyone ignoring medical instructions. Evangeline leaned into Sebastian's side, Nera calm and bright beneath her skin. He touched the mark at her throat with 2 fingers, the way he had on the first night, but now with settled wonder. I waited centuries, he murmured, eyes on the moon, to feel alive. She threaded her fingers through his. Worth the wait? He looked at her like the answer had always been yes. Every winter of it. Then, softer, fierce with gratitude. Thank you for choosing me anyway. Evangeline rose on her toes and kissed the scar at his throat. then the mark at his shoulder, then his mouth. Always mate, she whispered. Below them, young wolves laughed in the moonlight where chains would never touch them again.